How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video. And yes, it's confirmed. The FTC has officially lost the appeal against Microsoft Activision merger. They tried to split the companies up. They tried a preliminary injunction by appealing, and it was denied. Now, obviously, this is going to be a massive win for Xbox, a massive win for Microsoft. But has this decision come a little too late? Has this victory come at a bittersweet moment? Because personally, in my opinion, had this trial not dragged on for the 2-3 years that it actually did, I genuinely believe we would have seen a different Microsoft than what we have seen today. That is my personal opinion. The Microsoft may have won the battle, but they definitely lost the war with the FTC. Now, we do have a transcript here from the FTC, so I'm going to go through this real quick because I just want to cover this, and then I just want to talk about it a little bit because there's quite a bit to unpack here, right? The panel affirmed that the district court's denial of a motion by the Federal Trade Commission (FTC) for preliminary injunctive relief against Microsoft's acquisition of the video game developer Activision Blizzard Incorporated. The merger is the subject of an administrative proceeding that remains pending before the FTC. In its administrative complaint and in seeking a preliminary injunction in the district court, the FTC asserted that the merger would likely violate Section 7 of the Clayton Act because viewing the merger as a vertical integration between a content platform operator and a content producer, competition would be substantially lessened in the relevant US-based content platform markets for gaming console devices. Now, obviously, as we've seen, Microsoft has been working very hard over the past 2-3 years to make it seem that that's not the case. They've been putting games on their rival platforms, whether it's the Nintendo Switch or the Sony PlayStation, in order to show that that is not the case. And in fact, they've gone as far as basically making them parity exclusive, right? So Microsoft is getting no free skins, extra skins or extra maps or extra this or extra that. There's nothing that Microsoft is actually getting from this $70 billion acquisition from these games that makes it stand out and encourages people to come and buy their platform. Not like what Sony was doing at the time, where they would get a exclusive game mode or an exclusive quest or exclusive skins. It was okay when Sony did it, but the moment Microsoft tried to do it, the FTC said, no, that is not what we're happening here. But that has basically been thrown out the window because they just couldn't prove it. Gaming subscription services, they tried to argue that Game Pass was a bad thing and that it encouraged people to come over to Xbox. That was, as we've seen over the years, not really being the case, with Microsoft putting up the price twice in the space of like 18 months, I believe, to try and kind of alleviate that somewhat as well, even though some people actually complained about that and said Microsoft shouldn't have done that. And gaming cloud streaming services. Now, obviously, Ubisoft has control of these for a number of years, but after that, I think Microsoft is going to take those back, and we'll really see Microsoft go into their own once that cloud service has gone out the window. The panel held that the district court applied the correct legal standards, Jacqueline and calling, and did not abuse its discretion or rely on clearly erroneous findings, in holding that the FTC failed to make a significant evidentiary showing to establish the requisite likelihood of success on the merits of its Section 7 claim. Thus, the FTC had not raised serious questions regarding whether the proposed merger was likely to substantially lessen competition in the relevant markets. First, pertaining to the console market, the panel agreed with the district court that the FTC failed to sufficiently show evidence. Now, that's essentially the whole nutshell, but let's talk about what's actually happened over the last, 3 years. Microsoft, in order to try and get this pushed through with the regulators, they had a disastrous Xbox One era with the Kinect launch and the DRM, even though we're seeing today that's pretty much what's in place by everyone. Then the Series X launched without a Halo, and the second and third year, they kind of needed those games to bolster the Xbox Series consoles, and they never came. They never came because Microsoft was stuck in a battle with the FTC over Activision Blizzard, so they tried to make themselves look as weak as humanly possible, as a company that basically, they were showing graphs and high charts and just showing and allowing Sony to gain more and more momentum with their market share, while they deliberately lost market share to show themselves weaker, in a worse position than they actually were. And you know what? The playing community, the gaming community, the Xbox fans stayed loyal and they stayed behind them all the way. The problem was, once it got to a point where they dug that hole too deep, I just don't think Microsoft had a chance to get back out. There's a saying, you may have won the battle, but you lost the war. And I think in this situation, the FTC lost the battle in this appeal, but ultimately they got what they wanted. They dissolved what the Xbox brand actually is in terms of the platform. And we're seeing this today with Doom going day and date to PlayStation, Gears going day and date to PlayStation. The FTC got exactly what it wanted in the end. They may have lost the battle, but does it really matter? They, you know, at the end of the day, Microsoft was a first-party hardware manufacturing platform, and now, because of this whole situation with the FTC, they've pivoted in a way that they had to in order to get this merger to go through and finalized. And all of the stuff that they've been doing up until this point has been because of this FTC trial. I will stand by that until I'm black and blue. That is my belief. Now, do I believe that Microsoft would have gone down the route that they are right now in the strategic direction that they're in if the FTC didn't take them to court? Absolutely not. 100% not. I think Microsoft would have made a lot of those games exclusive. I think Paris was absolutely right? When he turned around and said, you don't spend $70 billion to put the games on your rival platforms. You just don't do that. You use those games to leverage people to come to your platform and buy those games on your platform so you can actually... I also think Game Pass would have been totally different to what we have it today had that actually happened. I think Game Pass was cool and everything, but things would have changed drastically. But here we are in a world where, even though Microsoft is going to celebrate and the Xbox fans are going to cheer that the FTC case is finally over, I think the ultimate winners here are the FTC, because they got exactly what they wanted. They gave Microsoft a bloody nose, and and essentially they kind of destroyed the Xbox hardware business. Yes, Microsoft is still making another Xbox device that's going to come out, but what is that going to look like? Would it have been another console that we would, like a traditional console? Would they have gone down the route of them releasing a hybrid or a PC platform that's going to integrate Steam and Epic? Would they have gone down the route that they are right now had none of this happened? And my honest answer to that is no. I don't think that they would have. But their hand was forced because they dug too deep. They made themselves look too weak. And you know the saying, if you dig the hole too deep, you can't get back out. And I think Microsoft got to a point where they dug the hole so deep that they literally couldn't come back out. And ultimately, they had to change strategy and pivot into a new way, which was basically making Game Pass now the center focus and everything else secondary, and then pushing the games out to as many platforms as possible in order to recoup that money and make as much money as possible. I mean, that's where I'm standing. The history will record that Microsoft took down the FTC in one of the biggest, battles in courts. But the unwritten history will tell you that ultimately the FTC won. And anyone that's not biased and actually has a clear way of thinking will tell you the same. And it's a shame. But you know what? Let's see what Microsoft does now. Now that the FTC is completely out of the way, everything is open for them. Will we start to see those games from Activision Blizzard appearing on Game Pass? Will we start to see an influx of those Call of Duty games, which can now, via pretty much a click of a button, appear in Game Pass, ready to go for you to play? Will that happen, or are they going to continue to drip feed like business as usual and try and maximize profits while they're doing it? My assumption is it's going to be the latter. So ultimately, we are where we are, but The big question now stands is, what's next for Xbox? What's next for Microsoft? Are they going to go and look at picking up other studios as well? We've just seen a new studio being created within Sony, the LFG team LFG. Is Microsoft going to start looking at other studios? I mean, EA is probably out of the question. Ubisoft is doing their Tencent thing. Sega is not interested. Capcom's not interested. Square Enix, I just don't think so. They're in a good place right now. But ultimately, it's going to be some of the more niche companies. They've clearly given up with the Japanese side of things, in trying to appeal to the Japanese market. So where do they go from here? I mean, I still believe that there's another purchase in them. I think they've got one more in them. But where do they go from here? But ultimately, I think this case was Microsoft's biggest hurdle. And in order to win it, they sacrificed the console. They sacrificed a lot. And I hope it was worth it in the end. Game Pass has evolved into something, even bigger today because of it. But in my opinion, the console, reputation and the console itself took such a battering because of it, as Microsoft had to pivot into something completely different to show the regulators, to show the FTC, to show the judges that they are being friendly with their games, they are sharing their games, and they're not looking to make them exclusive. But no one can sit there and tell me that if the FTC had approved this merger without actually trying to apply for a preliminary injunction, that these games would not have been exclusive. I still believe COD would have been on PlayStation. That game is just too big not to make it multi-platform. But I think games like Doom and Fallout and the Elder Scrolls, I think these games would have been exclusive to the Xbox platform, or where Game Pass exists. When Phil Spencer said those words, I genuinely believe he meant it. But with the direction that they were having to go in order to win this case and show the world that they're not trying to make games exclusive, the FTC just completely bled them dry and forced their hand into a path that I believe that Phil didn't want to go into, but he had no choice. And with Satcher being the way he is, not believing in exclusives, and the consoles not selling the way they are, so people aren't really coming into the ecosystem as much as, as quick as they want to, and Game Pass not expanding the way it could have, all because of this FTC trial. So yeah, in my opinion, I stand by what I said. The FTC lost the battle. Microsoft finally won the battle with the FTC, and this appeal is done, and the FTC cannot appeal against this either. But ultimately, I don't think the FTC cares anymore, because the Microsoft of the year 2000, the Microsoft of the year 2020 is no longer here. The Microsoft you have today is a completely different company in terms of their gaming division and their gaming, plans. It's not even worth the FTC trying anymore. And that's why you'll see that even if they could appeal it again, they won't, because they got what they wanted. And that was having Xbox games, Activision games, Blizzard games on all other platforms, not just the Xbox. But hey, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Who do you think Microsoft is going to go for next? Do you think that they're going to try and buy another publisher? Or do you think they're done? Sony just created their team LFG. Do you think Microsoft is going to follow that route? Do you think Xbox is going to go and pick up more smaller studios and add to their portfolio? I think they personally will. But this case is officially over. Microsoft and the shareholders can relax. And we'll see what this means for Xbox going forward. I can't see them pivoting back anymore. I can't see them restructuring back anymore, because, in my opinion, the damage is done. And there's no real way for them to go back to it. But at least one thing is for certain, and one thing is 100% guaranteed. The FTC has lost its appeal against Microsoft Activision merger, and this case is done. Well, folks, that's it. If you've enjoyed this content, hit that like button, subscribe, hit that bell to stay up to date with all content I release. If you want to support me further, you can do that via the super thanks, or becoming a YouTube member. But if you just want to support me for free, hitting that subscribe button and that like button, leaving a comment is the easiest way to support me and the cheapest way to support me. We are streaming tomorrow with Chili, where we'll be talking about the FTC, GTA, and among other things. Hopefully I'll see you tomorrow here on this channel. But with that said, thank you so much for watching. If you do want to get in touch with me, you can do that through my Discord or through social media on X or other means, all in the description below. That's the video. The FTC is done for. I'm done with this video. I'll see you in the next one. Remain legend.